Hey HOA, we're going to continue our discussion of the events of the Civil War, moving on to 1862. Just a reminder, here's our main questions that we're trying to answer. Now, at the start of 1862, Lincoln's got the border states pretty much under control. The blockade is getting stronger. Initially, the blockade didn't really amount to very much. It was more of a declaration. But by the start of 1862, the Union Navy has started to build additional ships, and they've got some bases to work from, and they are starting to get to the point where they can actually make the blockade effective. The British are neutral and look like they're going to stay that way for a while. There's a Union Army that's all trained up, thanks to McClellan. So Lincoln in early 1862 is like, hey, let's get her done. And he's, sending increasingly urgent messages to McClellan, hey, do something with that big army now that you've built it. But McClellan is still very cautious. He spent a year building this army. He doesn't want to risk it and, have to go all the way back to square one. But eventually they come to agreement, and McClellan is going to be ready to move. Meanwhile, the Navy's continuing to tighten the noose into the Gulf of Mexico, and in particularly headed up towards New Orleans. So this is, New Orleans is, one of the main ports of the Confederacy, so this is going to be a key element. And it's also the control of the Mississippi is kind of implementation of the Anaconda Plan. Meanwhile, headed down the Mississippi, or at least down near the Mississippi, is General Ulysses Grant. He captures Forts Henry and Donaldson, which are on the Tennessee and Cumberland rivers, which both kind of run very close together south from the Ohio. Tennessee eventually goes all the way down into Alabama, and the Cumberland runs over towards Nashville. So control of these rivers is going to be a really big deal in the central part of the Confederacy. Now, about this time, Lincoln is continuing to make moves on slavery. District of Columbia was the one place where the federal government had complete authority over slavery, and in April 1862, Congress is going to outlaw slavery in D.C. And it's going to be compensated emancipation. This is pretty much Lincoln's sort of, setting an example of how this thing can go, in trying to encourage the southern states to return to the Union and, take a good deal. Lincoln is going to press the border states to kind of, hey, get on board with this, and they're pretty much going to wave him off. They don't want to get rid of their slaves. And Lincoln still isn't really prepared to force the issue because he thinks he doesn't have the constitutional power to do it. Meanwhile, down in Virginia, at the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay, there's a battle that's going to have an impact on sort of naval technology going forward. The Confederates had captured a Union ship called the USS Merrimack and had converted it, renamed it the CSS Virginia, and converted it to an ironclad, basically, armor plating its upper hull so that it would be, practically indestructible. It would also be, extremely heavy and extremely difficult to maneuver. So it's really only going to be good for kind of guarding the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay. It's not going to be able to sail up the Potomac and shell Washington or anything like that. To deal with this threat, the Union had come up with a new design for their own ironclad, the USS Monitor, which is much smaller, but also much lower to the water and much more difficult to hit with anything. So these two ships are going to duke it out at Hampton Roads in the mouth of the Chesapeake. And basically for a whole afternoon, they bounce cannonballs off of each other. It's not really, there's no clear winner at the end of the thing. Neither one of them can destroy the other. But it is a sign that, you know, the future of naval warfare is not going to be wooden ships. McClellan is finally going to get going with something that comes to be called the Peninsular Campaign, because he's going to head down the Potomac, down Chesapeake Bay, and land his army down at Fortress Monroe, down here on the peninsula that is formed by the James River and the York River. And the idea is he's going to march up this way and take Richmond from the east. So this is kind of, you know, on to Richmond 2.0. McClellan is going to make very slow progress. He doesn't want to take any risks, and he, you know, wants to have overwhelming numerical superiority whenever he confronts the Confederates. This drives Lincoln crazy because Lincoln says, you know, just, you know, do it. It doesn't have to be perfect. They've got worse problems than you've got, you know, get her done. But, you know, McClellan moves at McClellan's speed. Meanwhile, in the West, there's going to be a battle in western Tennessee at a place called Shiloh. And this was an attempt by the Confederates to run the Union Army back out of Tennessee. It's not going to be successful. This battle is going to be notable for the number of casualties. You're going to have 26,000 killed and wounded at this one battle, which is like twice as many people as had been killed or wounded in the entire war, first year of the war. So it's a sign that this thing is going to be getting a lot more violent than it had been before. And as part of that, the Confederate states are going to institute conscription, a draft. They weren't getting enough volunteers to replace their losses. And so there was mandatory 3-year service for all males 18 to 35, except people engaged in necessary occupations. Because the other problem the Confederates have is you can't just suck all the people into the army. They're also trying to, you know, produce weapons and maintain an economy and that kind of thing. So, you know, pulling people out of what few industrial factories they've got is not going to help the war effort either. And they also have to produce food, and they have to keep a railroad system going. And there's, you know, they're trying to get a lot done with not enough people. Some of the exceptions are going to fall more heavily on the heads of wealthy people. So it's going to be basically poor people who are getting drafted and wealthy people who are dodging it. And that's going to create some tension between those two social classes. And it's going to come to be called a rich man's war, but a poor man's fight, since they are, after all, fighting for the large planter class and their continuation of slavery. In April, New Orleans is going to surrender, having been taken largely by the Navy. And at this point, the lower Mississippi River is going to be pretty much under Union control. New Orleans is no longer going to be a port that the Confederacy can use, and they're, you know, that much further along with the Anaconda Plan. And then, having taken possession of New Orleans, there's an incident involving General Benjamin Butler, who is the Union commander in New Orleans. He has a problem because the ladies of New Orleans are not happy that the Union Army is occupying, and they were not treating the soldiers very well. There was a particularly famous incident where Admiral Farragut was standing on the sidewalk outside of a house, and one of the ladies of New Orleans dumped a chamber pot on his head. General Butler didn't like that, and he issued General Order 28, which said basically that any female who shall by word, gesture, or movement insult or show contempt to any officer or soldier of the United States shall be regarded and held liable to be treated as a woman of the town plying her avocation. Now, what exactly did he mean by that? I mean, he's saying she shall be regarded and held liable to be treated like a prostitute. General Butler subsequently said what he meant was they wouldn't be entitled to respect as ladies. But the interpretation of a lot of people, which caused a huge outrage in the Confederacy and in Europe, was what this really meant was, sort of open season on, rape and that kind of thing. It didn't really come to that. The ladies of New Orleans got the message and started treating the officers and soldiers of the United States with more respect. But this is definitely going to be a propaganda coup for the Confederates. And then we have the interesting incident of Robert Smalls and the CSS Planter in May of 1862. Robert Smalls, who you see here in the picture, he was a slave on a relatively small farm in Charleston. His owner hired him out for service. There was a lot of work needing done in Charleston and not very many white people to do it. And the deal was Robert Smalls, whatever he got paid for whatever he was doing, he got to keep $1 a day, and his master got the rest of it. Not a very good deal for Robert Smalls, but he's trying to raise enough money to buy freedom for himself and his family. Now, at the rate that he's going at $1 a day, that's probably going to take him, 30, 40 years. So he finally decides that he's got other options. The work that he was doing was actually, he was piloting ships through Charleston Harbor. Now, in peacetime, this would have definitely been a white man's job, but things being what they were, he's got the position. And then one night, as was their custom, the white sailors on the ship sort of left him in charge while they went off to, have an evening out, not thinking that anything would happen. Robert Smalls had, sort of lulled them into believing that he wasn't going to try anything. He and the black members of the crew smuggle their families on board and pilot this ship out of the harbor right under the noses of the Confederates. I mean, it's a pretty dicey thing because Robert Smalls has to be up on deck sort of wearing the captain's hat and the captain's coat and hoping that it's dark enough that nobody's going to notice that he's not the captain. But he does successfully give all the signs and signals that were appropriate, which he had sort of watched the captain doing. And he gets the ship all the way out of the harbor, fortunately for him, because had he been captured, of course, they'd have all been killed. Makes his way to the Union blockade, surrenders the ship to the Union Navy, and becomes a hero in the North. He is eventually going to be elected one of the first United States congressmen from South Carolina, but that's getting way ahead of our story. Immediately, what he's doing is providing a lot of intelligence about, what the situation is in Charleston, and convincing Lincoln that, maybe escaped slaves could be useful to the Union Army. McClellan finally gets as close to Richmond as he's going to get in July of 1862. But the new commander of the Virginia forces, Robert E. Lee, is going to stop his progress and basically force him to retreat. Lincoln is going to be extraordinarily upset about this and is going to relieve McClellan of command. Lee is going to go down in history as a great tactical commander, a guy who can win victories even when he's outnumbered. And, there's some truth to that. And McClellan is going to go down in history as a guy who is way too cautious and, doesn't have any sort of ability to force the issue, even though he has massive numerical superiority. In a sense, this is not fair to either of these guys. Lee is doing crazy things because he has no other choice. And for the time being, those crazy things are going to work. But eventually, his luck is going to run out, and we'll see that later on up in a place in Pennsylvania. McClellan, his caution is kind of, reflected in the fact that it took so long to put that army together, and he still didn't regard it as being, fully ready to do the job that it was being asked to do. Later on, other generals are going to have success, but they're going to have success because McClellan built and maintained that army. In the aftermath of this, Congress is going to pass the Second Confiscation Act, and this is going to be upping the ante a little bit. You remember the First Confiscation Act said property, meaning slaves, used to support the rebellion could be seized by the army. This says any property owned by anyone supporting the rebellion, whether or not the property itself is being used to support the rebellion, can be seized by the army, and slaves who are seized, now that they are property of the United States Army, will be freed. So it's, amping things up, making it clear to the Confederates that, if they continue this rebellion, it's not going to go well for them. And not going to go well for the continuation of slavery. Now, Lincoln at this point is thinking about possibly doing something bigger in the way of emancipation. He's trying to sort of gradually turn up the heat on the South. He's pretty sure that Jefferson Davis is not going to surrender. But what he's kind of hoping is maybe the state governors in the Confederacy or something like that, or maybe even the people of the Confederacy, will sort of rise up and overthrow, Jefferson Davis and seek to return to the Union because it should be obvious to them that they're not going to win the war, and the longer that it goes on, the more damage it's going to do. So he's basically making them an offer that if they end the war now, they can get compensated emancipation. Slaves will be freed. But they'll get money for it, and they won't be completely out on their air. Plus, they can end the continuing destruction of the war and all of that. But if they fight on, they're going to get nothing, and eventually have a destroyed country and still have no slaves. Lincoln drafts a document to sort of put this out, but he doesn't want to release it right after McClellan's failure to attack Richmond. It'll look like a desperation move. He wants a victory. And so he kind of puts the thing in his desk drawer and waits for an ideal opportunity to release it. Meanwhile, out on the high seas, the CSS Alabama is going to start its storied career. Now, this is a ship that was built in England. It was specifically built for the purpose of commerce raiding, attacking Union merchant ships. It's very, very fast. It doesn't have the kind of armament that a warship would have, but it is fast enough that it can outrun a warship, and it can, take down any Union merchant ship, which, are mostly unarmed. It's built in Britain. The crew was mostly British. The captain was from the Confederacy, from Alabama. Officially, it was not authorized by the British government. Officially, these British crewmen were violating Britain's neutrality order and were subject to arrest if the British got hold of them. But the British weren't all that interested in getting a hold of them. The Alabama was mostly going to operate out of ports in France and other neutral countries. And sort of under the laws of war, having been granted belligerent status, they could not be attacked in port by the United States Navy. The rule was, when you're in port, everybody has to play nice. Once the Alabama got sort of out into international waters, it was fair game. But once it was out into international waters, it could outrun anything the United States had. So the Alabama is going to have a storied career over the next couple of years. Capturing Union shipping and in a lot of cases just sort of sinking it because they didn't really have the ability to get any supplies back home to the Confederacy. And this is going to be a very sore point between the United States and Britain. There were about a half a dozen other ships just like it, but the Alabama was the best of those and becomes the most famous. Meanwhile, Second Battle of Bull Run, General Pope, who had been given command after McClellan was relieved, is going to make yet another attempt to take Richmond from the north down through Manassas, and pretty much the same thing is going to happen that happened last time, only this time with 22,000 casualties. Pope is going to get fired, and McClellan is going to get his job back. And that's going to lead us to the Battle of Antietam. We're sort of in August of 1862, and Lee wants to invade the North for a couple of reasons. He's hoping that if he can score a major victory, that might encourage the British to take action to end the war or provide support or something. He also kind of wants to get his army out of Virginia and into someplace else where they can, forage for supplies and food, move the war sort of out of the farmlands of the Shenandoah Valley, where, there's a harvest that needs to be brought in so that the South doesn't starve to death. And then famously, Lee is going to write all the orders for this offensive and send them out to his various generals. One of those orders is going to fall into the hands of McClellan. And McClellan is going to be able to meet him out in western Maryland, just past Hagerstown, at a place called Sharpsburg on Antietam Creek. And we're going to become known to history as the Battle of Antietam. It's the bloodiest single day in American history, with losses on both sides. Lee is going to be defeated, but his army is going to safely retreat back into Virginia. And that's the thing that's really going to annoy Lincoln, because Lincoln wants Lee's army taken off the field, and McClellan was unable to do that. But it was a big enough victory that Lincoln felt comfortable issuing the Emancipation Proclamation. So, using his power as commander-in-chief, Lincoln is going to declare that all slaves will be freed in any state still in rebellion on January 1st, 1863. So he's basically saying, you got 90 days to end this thing, and if you don't, I'm going to free your slaves. As a war measure, because, as commander-in-chief, Lincoln has powers that he wouldn't have had in peacetime. Again, he's hoping to get something going, at least a few states, to sort of withdraw themselves from the Confederacy. Isn't going to happen. There were people in the Confederacy at this point that were like getting tired of the war, but none of them really felt secure enough to take on Jefferson Davis and appear to be disloyal. They were probably afraid that they would get thrown in jail or maybe worse. And so nobody is going to kind of take this step. But what the Emancipation Proclamation is going to do is make it clear that this is a war to end slavery and not just a war to restore the Union. That's going to pretty much take the British right out of it, because remember, the voters in Britain don't like slavery. And if this is a war to end slavery, there's no way Britain is going to come in on the slave side. It's also going to open the way for freed slaves, African Americans, to join the Union Army, and they are going to do so in large numbers. McClellan is going to get fired again because he failed to capture Lee's army at Antietam, and that's the end of McClellan as a major military commander. We are going to see him a little bit later on. Ambrose Burnside, of the impressive facial hair, going to get the job and be hugely defeated at Fredericksburg. Meanwhile, sort of the Emancipation Proclamation is hugely unpopular in the South, obviously. President Davis promises that any escaped slave in military uniform will not be treated as a soldier. He will be treated as an escaped slave and hung. Including any white officers leading black troops will be considered, inciters of servile rebellion and will also be hanged. Technically, this is a war crime, but, Davis doesn't really care. The South is also going to institute what they call the 20 Negro rule, which means any white person in the South who was in charge of managing 20 slaves was exempt from the draft. Davis is concerned about a slave rebellion, and he needs to keep enough people on the plantations, enough white people on the plantations, to keep those slaves in line. So by the end of 1862, Union forces are up over 1 million. This is all forces, across the board. Most of those guys are not particularly well trained yet, but they are sort of in uniform and at least theoretically available for combat. On the Confederate side, they've got 253,208, and that includes a lot of soldiers that are pinned down in the interior waiting for that slave revolt. So by the end of 1862, if you look at the map, there's very little Confederate territory in Union hands. There's a little bit of eastern North Carolina and a little bit of western Tennessee, northern Arkansas, and New Orleans, and that's about it. The map doesn't look that bad, but that disparate numbers of forces there does not bode well for the Confederacy going into 1863, and we'll see that in the next video. So that's it for today.